For Monday, July 15th, 2024. Note that this meeting is being recorded, may be broadcasted or rebroadcasted at WestfordCAT. We have 4 of our members here tonight. Darren is unable to make it. We'll start, as we always do, with open forum. Do you have anything, Mr. Morissette?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Genowitz?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
The board members, anything for open forum?
No. So,
All right, go to our first public hearing item. Oh, I apologize, Vinny.
No worries. There is still time for residents to take a survey on the Westford strategic planning. The survey will help the town understand from our residents' perspective, who are we as a town, what do we hope will be true of the town in the future, and what must go well in order to achieve this future. This survey should take you about 15 to 20 minutes to complete, and your answers will remain non-anonymous, and the survey will be available through the end of the day on August 12th to 2024.
Terrific, thank you. I
And
apologize.
where's this survey? Where can it be
is
found?
on westfordmass.gov. It should be one of the headline posts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So speaking of that, the other thing I would ask Jeff is to make sure it stays one of the headline posts. They tend to roll
Migrate
off.
down, yes.
So since we won't be meeting again until mid-August after that.
So vote early and often. Okay, great, thank you. PB 2409 for 426 Littleton Road has been continued from March 4th to April to May, June without discussion. We're here today for an update.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Carr from Stamsky McNary. I'm the civil engineer for the project. The attorney, Doug Deshane, could not be here. He just got his hip replaced. So I'll take you guys through some of the changes since we were last before you. And we did have conservation hearing last week. We're in good shape with them. We have, revised the plan in response to a couple of their comments, like snow storage areas and getting some more wetland flagged. So we have done that, and as far as we know, the Conservation Commission said that they needed to look at the plans a little bit closer, but they didn't expect any further plan changes from their review. As you may know, we have satisfied the engineering department's comments, and I know the attorney, Doug, had been in discussion with planning staff as well as the building inspector, Henry, about the parking situation here. So the proposed building here falls under the category of general services establishment. And according to the Westford zoning bylaw, that type of building requires 1 parking space per 200 square feet of gross floor area. And for this proposed building, that would have meant 45 parking spaces. And the design team, and I believe the planning staff also agrees that this building would never really need that many parking spaces. So we're proposing to bank 10 parking spaces, and we did just recently submit a special permit to do so. So we don't want to build these 10 banked parking spaces, but we have proven that they can fit on site. They meet all the wetland offset buffers, and the stormwater system would work if those banked parking spaces ended up being built. And so we can prove that the 59 spaces would be required according to the zoning bylaw for these 2 uses on site, but we're proposing to build 49 and bank those 10 extra spaces. And other than that, we flagged more wetland, like I mentioned before, which made us tweak the septic system just a little bit. And what else? I think that pretty much covers it. We moved all snow storage areas out of the buffer zone, which was a request of the Conservation Commission. I think that covers basically all the changes since we were last before the board. Did I miss anything?
So you said you have applied for the special permit?
Correct.
Yeah. Right, so what's the process on that, Mr. Morissette?
So we received that request to amend on either, I don't know if it was Thursday or Friday, and we did not include that information in this packet. Typically for something like this, the applicant has been asked to assume any and all risk associated with any potential defect in the notice without creating a new public hearing. In a case like this, from a big picture perspective, you know, they're still proposing the same use, they're still proposing the same structures. They're really simply asking to not construct part of the parking that was proposed. Could it create some kind of minor flaw? It could. Would it be fatal? That's not for us to say. It would be for a court if anyone had standing to challenge. But we would not ask the board to take that up until, I'm not sure if that was included in the application materials, but I believe the attorney weighed those risks and is willing to assume any such liability on the part of the client, which we don't object to that approach.
Okay.
Wait, so that means the client is accepting the risk of future litigation and the funds necessary to address those? If
Any
parking
risk.
is deemed to be deficient?
Yes, they are
Okay.
they're bearing that risk.
Thanks, okay.
And just to add to that, I do have a neighbor next to us at that location, and I've asked if we could do the same. They have spare parking as well, and potentially maybe even the Kimball property across the street. Not that we would need it, but it might be something that we could use if we had to. And once that's been settled for sure, then we'll let you know.
So, where are we now with this? Is engineering signed off on this, Joe?
They had two minor requests. One for the banked parking spaces, just that they received the calculations, just for their own cursory review to ensure that if full build-out did happen at some point in the future and those 10 spaces were built, that the stormwater system would still function. And then, I don't know, maybe there's been some communication that I'm just not aware of, about a barrier between the dry well and the retaining wall. Just a clarification on that
Yeah.
barrier.
Yeah, we added a plastic barrier around the corner of some of the roof dry wells to protect breakout from coming out the side of the slope. And that was a request of the engineering department.
We'll go to the board. Bob, do you have any questions?
I have a couple. I'm fine with the banking of the parking spaces, but I spoke to Joe earlier today. I think based upon the observations from the site walk, my observations are that with the current Sullivan Tire establishment, parking in front is fairly neat and orderly, but behind it is what I would call a little bit chaotic. And I am a little bit concerned about maintaining the fire access back to this building. And so, very minor request, but I'd like to ask that fire lanes be established with pavement marking, especially to the start of that bridge over the brook. And maybe along a lot of that, some signs on stakes indicating no parking, fire lane. And that would make me feel a lot better, all the way from the start of the parking back here down to the front of the Sullivan Tire. As I say, that just seems to be where people have a tendency to try to park
Right.
on the side and could inhibit fire lane access. I'm willing to look to the fire department to help us establish what is the appropriate width, turning radiuses. I'm looking for the turning radius, especially as we now enter this property up here, because it looks like what had been straight is now slightly curved
Roll
with an
up on
S
the-
curve.
We actually have a fire truck turning template. on the plan.
Yeah, and that's good.
Might I just suggest that rather than using the term fire lane, could we just say signage or markings to the satisfaction of the fire department? Because it may just be
That's fine.
signage saying no
I just
parking.
make sure there's no parking. Just want to make sure it's kept free and clear.
Right.
Yep.
For that access. Because it was, as I say, chaotic on the day we were there. In fact, Mike and I had some challenges just getting our
Yeah.
vehicles out of
There's a
there.
lot of cars in on that day.
There are,
That's what- that is what happens.
but without the signage, that's what happens. And that's my only concern is, I don't think anybody did anything illegal that day per the markings, but
I probably did, but.
we want to make sure it doesn't happen. And the other questions I have just have to do with what's happened with the amount of wetness that was up on that site, that's all been resolved, there's.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the only thing we did, as Danny mentioned, was we had earlier plans that had flags for the wetlands outside on the Littleton area, which we, once we get out there, we did find a little spot that needed to be eliminated, and so we moved the septic further closer to the building for that reason only.
Yeah.
I guess I was, I mean, I'm concerned about the wetlands, but just more concerned about the amount of water up there.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't delineated wetlands, if you recall, when we did the site walk, we were walking through,
Yeah, that was outside the
2 feet of
100-foot
muck.
buffer.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's just really due to the machines that had been out there, and we usually cut out there, and they pack the soil, the topsoil.
But it did indicate there's water that has to go somewhere from
Yeah.
up there.
Yep, we have done test pits, which actually can probably account for some of the wetness that we saw on site. You know,
Okay.
when you dig 10 feet deep and fill it back in, water doesn't, flow off as well. But we have done test pits on site, and seasonal high water table is pretty close to the surface, like 2 to 3
2 feet,
feet.
yeah.
So the site is brought up with fill to get us our separation
Okay.
to groundwater.
That's fine, that's good. The last area of concern has to do with the type of business. I appreciate the parking calculation, but based upon what we did with Makepeace Road, and I think a very similar proposal for a contractor bay facility, we were, at that location, we were closer to some abutters, but we still have to worry about the noise. And so I do think we have to worry about making sure we understand rules of operation for, and hours of operation for these businesses, and what is and is not permitted as activities within the contractor bay space. Such things as like metal cutting can be very noisy, welding is not. But do we have to worry about the noise, especially on the weekends and outside of, let's say 7 AM to 6 PM? So,
Well, I can answer this way. Well, first, we want to make sure that you understand we agree with no asphalt type business will be held there with any of those type of materials. But as Conservation asked about chemicals and gas and stuff like that, the sprinkler engineer determined that the highest we can go with racks in each bay is 12 feet. You can't build racks to store things higher than 12 feet because it'll affect the spray of the, the nozzles. So we just addressed that in the lease. So that'll be part of the lease, that anybody leasing these bays can't build a shelf any higher than 12 feet. Well, with Conservation, they had similar questions too. And I think at that point, I think we just decided that landscapers do have, chemicals for grass, and they do carry gasoline, we all know that. But any of those types of products, we can make sure that that's in the lease. It's just an easy thing to put in there. There will be no chemicals of such to be stored outside the building. Everything will be inside the building. If they have trailers, which a lot of landscapers do today, there's containment value in trailering. Outside trailers with no covers is a little different story, but any particular thing, such as even the plowing, we discussed the plowing, things like that can actually be put in the lease so that we make sure that things stay where they should be. So, for instance, hours, whatever the hours that are legal to have or whatever, if there are any issues that you have, we can simply make it part of the lease.
And I know
As a-
we had agreed to go back to the Conservation Commission if someone were to rent out a bay that wasn't under a general services establishment category. And so I think we would also have a condition like that in the planning's decision about, if a change in use someone was to rent it out with a change in use, we would come back before the board with a site plan review. Make sure.
Okay.
this project.
Yep.
One last question is just based on now this discussion I just noted, looking towards the top of this print, I know it's got a proposed walkway. Is that surface firm enough for a fire truck to get back there? And has the fire department even looked at that?
The fire department has confirmed that they had adequate access to the site, that walkway around the rear of the building was not intended for a fire truck or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the fire department's letter in the
Yeah.
packet, but.
I just asked based upon the fact that we know that it was very difficult to walk off of the packed surface that,
Right.
I'm asking about that. So, but, okay.
Hi, Jeannie?
Two questions. Was the Mass DOT access permit ever finalized?
No, we have not applied for that yet.
Okay. And that's, to me, more procedural. Jeff, is that, or Joe, is that something that we should see or they should have before construction begins, I would think?
So typically, we would put an advisory condition, because it is, what you do. You can't tell MassDOT or anything what to do. If it's something that's required, they have to already secure it, but we usually ask that they provide evidence of that, before getting a building permit, to show that it's not being missed.
Okay, thank you. All right, yeah, if you could do that, that would certainly be helpful. And then, again, another procedural question. In the past, I thought that we've seen some stormwater draft maintenance plans, but yet I didn't see one here. So I'm not sure if that's something we would typically see this early or not.
We did include a stormwater operation and maintenance manual in the stormwater report.
Okay, okay,
And typically the final one will get reviewed again by the engineering department.
perfect. Okay, that's all I was
Things
asking about.
change
Yes,
as they have
of course,
as they go
yeah.
through this process.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. That was it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I had the dry wells on my list because I saw it in the packet, but it sounds like that's been addressed. As long as engineering is satisfied with, what the applicant has put in place, I'm good with that. From a parking perspective, I guess I echo Bob's comments in that I don't really have a concern, and I prefer less spaces than more, and if they're not needed, and given the fact that you're assuming the risk of anything that comes up down the road, I'm fine with that. I did notice in the packet, so the last two comments that I have are really more, I guess, Joe, file under items to address when we talk about improvements to the zoning bylaws. One, I noticed that engineering was referring to this as a contractor yard, and the applicant has resolved this using general business, and I don't know, given Bob's comments on how frequently the contractor yard concept is coming up as a deficiency in the local real estate market for contractors, is a distinction for parking something we should consider carving out so it's not considered general business in the future? Since it probably does have its own set of requirements, and there's some amount of parking inside of these places as well as outside, and they're probably also small shops, so they may not need as much as a general establishment that's generally open to the public. So maybe something we can consider on a future bylaw pass. The other is coming back to something that Bob and I came across when we were researching the amendment that failed about drive-throughs, and that is we don't have a general noise ordinance in the bylaws, and other than the major commercial projects, and maybe it's time we start considering putting something like that in. Why?
So based upon a number of comments and/or complaints from residents, the building commissioner, and will be assisting, is going to approach the select board about sponsoring a general bylaw amendment relative to noise
Fantastic.
for this fall.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Once in a while, we have news to your liking.
That's awesome.
Once in a while.
Great. No, I think that's good. Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now again, procedurally, Mr. Morissette, since we do have a new application, how do you want to proceed with this? Do we close the public hearing on this? Do we?
I would not close the public hearing tonight. It sounds like there was some positive direction from the board. I think what might make sense is to start, direct staff to work on a draft decision, knowing that you'll be looking at the special permit for parking at that next meeting. And we could even be so bold so as to kind of work that into the draft decision process, so you have benefit
think that'd
of
be a great idea.
both decisions.
And so our next meeting is August 19th.
Right, just to be cautious, I want to make sure, there's no one from the public who wants to speak tonight.
Does anybody have any questions from the public? All right, so with that information, does the 19th work for you folks?
Yes.
Staff will work on a draft decision, including the potential amendment with the special permit.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to continue this to our August 19th meeting here at 7 o'clock?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
You too.
Okay, if you're here for 7 Carl Thompson Road, we're sorry, we should announce this before. We were continuing this matter without discussion till the 19th as well. That will conclude the public hearing process for tonight.
We still need a vote.
No, jeez.
Motion, second, motion,
For what?
to continue.
We need to continue.
Carl Thompson? All right. So motion continue.
I make a motion to continue with 7 Carl Thompson to the 19th of August at 7 PM in this room.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. Sorry about that. Thought we were speeding right along here. First general business item, request for an extension of time for PB 1121, 134 Littleton Road, related to planning board approval for 1 additional year to August 10th, 2026.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, and we do have the applicant here tonight, but if you may recall, the board recently sort of approved an updated stormwater management permit for this site. This is the site that's at the front of the church site. At your last time the board looked at this, there was enough evidence, staff suspected that the site plan approval had previously been vested. But the applicant is now working with a couple of prospective tenants, and the timing is such that, in an abundance of caution, they would like to seek a 1-year extension of the approvals for this project to calm the nerves of the prospective tenants. So, I don't know if that's good enough for you, sir?
That's a good representation of
And
the
I think
situation.
we know that the regulations haven't changed since this was approved.
That's correct. The engineering department, the applicant did update the stormwater to be, keeping in mind with the current regulations, which did change from the original approval, but they have not changed effectively from when you last saw this.
Terrific. Bob, do you have any questions?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Tony?
No, nothing, thanks.
Nope. Neither do I. Can I get a motion to extend? Would that be appropriate, Mr. Morissette?
Sure, grant a 1-year extension
Additional
to,
extension to PB 1121 Stormwater Management for 134 Littleton Road.
and just to put the applicant and their prospective tenants at ease, in a prior decision, the board found that the site plan approval is already vested, so we're happy to throw that in to the language for this as well, so.
Terrific.
So moved.
I would also suggest that the language be to extend it to August 10th, 2026.
Terrific. All right, the motion with the friendly amendments. All those in favor say aye.
Wait, I'm sorry, who was the second? You made
Add
that?
to the date to the,
Joni.
I was the
Joni, okay, thank you, sorry.
the date to August 10th, 2026. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, debrief regarding concept plan review and preliminary discussion process under section 8.10 MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay District of the zoning bylaw.
Yeah, so we just wanted to get the board's feedback based on the last conversation. Obviously, the applicant came in probably a little bit earlier than they wanted to, but that was kind of based on some timelines that they had from the current property owner. But we wanted to get your feedback to see if you felt like you had enough information. Was there anything that you felt like was missing? Is there anything that would be helpful, just as we anticipate future potential concept plans coming in as well under the MICMOD?
So we're not looking necessarily for specific comments about that proposal, just in general.
So,
About the process.
Go, Bob.
I thought about this probably about 2-3 days after the fact, and one thing I saw was there was a lot of discussion out on Facebook and other social media locations about this. But one of the things I realized that I wish I had asked for sooner and seen sooner was maybe an identification of those areas where there was compliance or requests for waivers specifically within the new zoning bylaw. Because it occurred to me that some of the areas that they were presenting to us and we were commenting on as being somewhat obnoxious, I guess is the best term I can come up with, is that they were frontages that we discussed in the bylaw, but we discussed them when they were for sites further back off of 110 or Powers Road. So I think calling out some of the sections that they were asking for relief from under this bylaw would be useful information. Because that's really what we were zeroing in on, were certain things that kind of fit the concept, but only if this had been a site that was further off of the main thoroughfare. So they were asking for relief from what the bylaw permitted. So just, I think better job of trying to look at how it complies or how it requires a waiver from the new bylaw.
So again, I don't think we're talking specifically about that one, but I think the only waivers they were originally looking for was just waiving the affordability component, right? Because they originally were far enough off. They weren't looking for the height waiver until they started configuring it differently.
They were too close to on the frontage.
So were they? Okay.
I guess it depends on, which concept you're talking.
Which concept?
I'm just saying it, but that, understanding those would, I think, make for a better and richer discussion.
Okay.
It's hard to separate a response to that, though, and take the context of what was being presented to us out of the equation, because that was very much a preliminary sniff test. That wasn't, you know what I mean? So I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. I just don't know if at the stage that particular applicant was at, if going to that level of detail of like highlighting all the
I kind of think they did
waivers.
though, right? So their first one was no waivers,
The as of right option.
as of right, and then the second was waiver for, affordability, and the third was like frontage.
Yeah.
So I think they did
Setback,
kind of call them out.
Setback, we had it was too tight a setback on the front setback.
But we hear what you're saying, Bob. I
I'm
think
just saying,
I
those are
think
the
it's a
kind
good
of
point.
things that I think would help, not only us, but would help the audience as they were seeing this. And the last thing, I almost wonder on some of these things, how do we get press releases out in the sense of, we did something that was of interest to the community, and our minutes aren't published yet, and yet the community is very concerned about this particular parcel, and is looking to understand what this board said. And there's an awful lot of misstatements out there right now, which is really frustrating, because everything I'm reading is exactly what we had concerns about.
You've pretty much approved it all without benefit of a public hearing.
Yeah, right.
Depending on.
That's what you'd
Been
read
traveling
and
for work, I
believe.
haven't been keeping up on the social media. I guess
Good for you.
I guess I won't get caught.
No, don't bother.
Oh, yeah,
Don't go there.
It's all downhill.
But anyways, I just,
All right.
Interesting.
Joni?
I think applicants coming in with whatever they have as soon as possible is a good thing, because I think, for whatever we came out of that, I think that they got some good ideas on what we were looking for and where we were heading. So I have nothing else that I would, other than, I understand what Bob, and I agree with Bob, as long as they outline what waivers, which I agree with Mike, they kind of did. You had to kind of dig a little bit, so, I think that was a really good idea to do what they did.
I do like the fact that we had other board members from other boards present. I thought that was also very good that night.
I agree with all of those comments. I mean, I felt like we had enough information in front of us to have a good, constructive conversation, get feedback from the public in general. I don't think there was any deficiencies. So if that was what you were asking, I felt like I had what I needed to listen to the applicant and give feedback and get feedback from the audience. I thought it was great.
So in my mind, this is a benefit to them. We're making ourselves available to let them, give them direction, right? So I think really we'll act on as much information as they want to give us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think obviously more information the better, but we're also not doing a site plan review. We're just doing a conceptual discussion, so.
Yep.
I think it's gonna be, there's also probably some, things are gonna keep closer to their chests. They don't own the property yet, right? And they, don't know exactly what they're gonna do. So I thought it went well. I don't know how we would change it to make it any better.
Yeah.
Just by general update, we're expecting to hear from the Attorney General's office on the bylaw around early to mid-August. I think it's August 8th or 9th. the
September should be
90-day.
busy.
And then a couple weeks after that from EOHLC.
Great.
How did the applicant feel about the process? I mean, it sounds like you said they thought that they came in maybe a little early, but in general, did they walk out of the room feeling like they got constructive feedback and they had a clear path or a clear-ish path on their next steps?
I do. We did have follow-up conversations, and so they thought, I think that the board was actually very thoughtful. We did tell them that they will give you their honest comments, and you did. And they feel as though they heard you loud and clear on a number of issues. And while there's no requirement for the historic structure, they heard loud and clear that was important. And they also heard that the importance of having at least some affordable component, like it would be deal breaker if there wasn't, an affordable component. So, so I think in that regard, they got some good direction. They got some good comments about the overall layout and feedback. And so I think to them it was worthwhile. It might not have been everything they wanted to hear, but they told us they would much rather have heard that then than once they were past their due diligence period. So they very much appreciated that opportunity.
So one other note to maybe to yourself and the staff, how to work in this situation in the future with these. You heard us say to them, one, have you read the Route 110 master plan? So I would encourage any of these developments which are going to be coming in along 110 to have familiarity with that plan. While there's a lot of deviation from that in the new bylaw, the MBTA bylaw, it still, I think, would behoove anybody to understand what is the town's desire from a design guideline perspective, how to construct along 110. Secondly, even though the master plan is somewhat aged, I think for somebody, if they want to come into the town like these folks did, not knowing the town that well, they might have gotten a better sense ahead of time about our appreciation for historic preservation. And lastly, the housing plan, understanding that, because I don't think they really fully understood what makes Westford special in the sense of our appreciation for affordable housing, historic preservation, and design aesthetic. So
Okay.
I use that as a constructive way to understand
Now-
us.
I will tell you that we did advise them of the Route 110 master plan. So we did advise them of that, so.
Yeah. But I make that note for all these
Yep.
developments, yeah.
Now, what's interesting with that plan, which, is that 1999?
1999, yep.
I think that sort of had a premise of the sidewalks would be on one side of Littleton Road, not the other. And unfortunately, of course, in the 50-50 situations, all the housing that we've had so far is on the other side of where the sidewalks were supposed to be. But of course, with the widening these days, you're going to have sidewalks on both sides.
I think the
Anyhow.
important thing, though, in that plan, since I was on that committee, was we did indicate the sidewalks, I think, were notional. And secondly, just that it was important there be at least one sidewalk either place. It was not important which side they were on, just as long as we provided pedestrian connectivity.
Yeah, and I don't think that's an option, like, you're going to have them, you're going to have sidewalks.
Right.
So.
We're still working towards that 25 years later. So,
All right, all good information, thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you. All right, now, general business item C, discussion pertaining special town meeting zoning bylaw amendments approach.
So Joe's been doing a lot of heavy lifting with a number of these items. He's gathering a lot of good information about parking, but we wanted to talk right now about some of the high-level approach. We think we want to have the minimum number of amendments to sort of get the job done, but at the same time, we don't necessarily want to combine everything into one ask because, so for instance, we think parking should be a standalone issue. The other thing we think is that we want to define and regulate more uses. So some of the uses that we've mentioned to you before are the brew pub and microbreweries, because we've been approached a number of times over the last 5 years, at least 5 or more times. Some people may think that's a great idea. Others may say no. So another use that's come up a lot is massage therapy. The Zoning Board of Appeals, you know, there's like at least 10 massage therapy establishments, and yet it's a prohibited use. So the other thing is restaurants in the IA district, like along Littleton Road. There's that one area by Gutierrez in particular. They would love to have a restaurant that's highly visible on Littleton Road. So we're wondering about having one amendment that speaks to the uses, defining and regulating, and amending the table of uses, and maybe just have multiple motions. So you could vote first on, you know, the brew pub and those, and we could even, if time allows, maybe contractor yards, because that is on our list. It's just about capacity. There's some other areas that there's some tricky language that could do with some slight tweaking to make things a lot more clear. That actually is in general service establishment.
Yes,
But
yes,
we
it
don't want to bite off too much, but you know, we're trying to keep the changes simple. So we're wondering how you feel about having one amendment that is maybe broken into multiple motions.
So it sounds kind of like the budget, right? So they can
Yeah.
read through them, and then if you're gonna stop on one, yeah, I think that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So we're not arguing for ever on something that doesn't need to be talked about.
Okay?
I'm fine with that. The only question I have is, I did raise I think during the open forum discussion last meeting, industrial zones and dimensional setbacks, especially when abutting residential. Having learned from a previous discussion a couple meetings ago, I would, if it can't make it this meeting, I would like to see it for a future town meeting so that we could discuss, especially where industrial A abuts residential, but I think all of the commercial districts should be looked at for dimensional setbacks, for proximity of parking areas, abutting residential zones, et cetera. So.
We have noted that. I would be lying if I think we could do that justice for this town meeting with everything else. The other thing is we also, you know, we related but not, we have applied for Route 40 corridor study, which would look at that specific issue. And if we benefit from that grant, we would probably want to, you know, have the results of that before maybe diving into that. But if we're unsuccessful with that grant, we can try to put that on for next year as well.
I just don't want to wait too long because I think in looking through the industrial A dimensional setbacks, I was shocked at how little protection there was for residential abutters. So,
Joe, am I missing something? Do we need more direction on that, or?
That's it.
Good?
All right.
All right, so I think our next item is a review of the meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes dated June 3rd, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Bob?
nope.
Joni?
No, nothing. thanks.
Dylan?
No, I was good with them.
Fine. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any other correspondence? I don't think I saw anything, did I?
June 17th are in
Oh.
there too.
June 7th, June 10th. Motion to approve the minutes for June 17th.
So moved.
Second,
Discussion? Bob?
no, nothing.
Joni?
No, nothing.
Dylan?
Nope. Well done as always.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. That's it.
Motion to adjourn.
So, second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.